Hi, in this lecture, we're going to go ahead and look at the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system. So remember that the autonomic nervous system has the sympathetic and the parasympathetic division. And in this picture, you can see the parasympathetic in green, and you can see the sympathetic in this kind of reddish color. When we look at the sympathetic, notice that it has its origins in the spinal cord in the thoracic and lumbar areas. So sometimes it's called the thoracolumbar region, whereas the parasympathetic has its origins up in the brainstem and the sacral area of the cord. So it's often called the craniosacral division. If we look at the sympathetic division, we know that this is the division that's dominant under stress. And so one way to think about it is with our E activities. Things like exercise and excitement or an emergency or even embarrassment. And so some of the things that it does is to get us through these situations, and it happens pretty quickly. One thing is it promotes adjustments mainly of blood flow during exercise. So when you exercise, you want blood to go to your skeletal muscles, so it's shunted to your muscle away from your digestive and urinary organs. So blood vessels to these organs actually constricts during exercise. Also think about this anytime you feel frightened or threatened. So if you've ever been home alone at night and you think you hear a doorknob turn, or you're driving down the road at night and a deer jumps in front of you, or you watch a scary movie because you like to get scared. So what happens is these instantly happen, right? And one thing is we feel more awake and more alert. So like if you're home and you think you hear something, all of a sudden your spidey sense tingles, right? And you think you can you're hypersensitive. You can hear everything and see everything, and we don't really have a spidey sense. That's just a reference to Spider-Man. It makes your heart rate go up really fast. Your respiratory rate, you start breathing faster and faster, RR, respiratory rate. Your skin might go cold and might become really sweaty. Your pupils dilate to let more light in so you can see more. Your bronchioles get bigger, the airway, right? The tubes in your lungs so that you can move more air. Your liver gets involved. It dumps glucose into your blood so your muscles have more energy if you have to fight or flee. And you even break down fat, again, to give more energy in case a battle is coming, or when you're exercising and you burn fat. So when we look at the sympathetic division, the anatomy, we know it runs between T1 and L2, and this is where those preganglionic neurons are. They're cell bodies, remember, in that lateral horn. They're going to send information to the sympathetic ganglia. So remember, there's a relay of two neurons here. And so the ganglia are located in three areas of the body. There's three types of ganglia. There's the sympathetic chain ganglia. These are lateral to the spinal cord, and they kind of look like a chain of beads running down. I can't draw very well, but you know that. And then this would be your spinal cord here, and they're on either side of the cord. I'll show you a better picture in a minute. So they're really, really close to the cord. The collateral ganglia are anterior to the spinal cord. They're in the front by your by your abdominal aorta. And then you have them inside your adrenal gland, your adrenal medulla. So you can call it adrenal medulla or suprarenal medulla. So we have our cell bodies and our lateral horns, right? We've talked about this a little bit, thoracic and lumbar. The ganglion is where they're headed, so we call them preganglionic neurons because they are all sending axons to the ganglia. There are three ganglia, 1, 2, 3. The chain ganglia next to the cord, the collateral right in front of the thoracic aorta, or inside the suprarenal or adrenal medulla. They go to the ganglion, and this is where the synapse occurs. So then the second one, remember, was called the postganglionic. A fiber is an axon. They go out to the effectors. So we always have this relay of two. Now, in this picture, you can see the green lines are the preganglionic axons. These yellow things, they kind of look like beads almost on either side of the spinal cord. These are going to be the sympathetic chain ganglia, and these are the collateral ganglia on the aorta. And notice that you see the incoming, right? The pre is the solid line, the dotted line is the post, and look at all the organs it goes to. So it's going to be able to move up and down to get from your pupil all the way down to your urinary bladder. And one thing to understand when we look at the sympathetic is that one preganglionic can synapse usually with approximately 30 post. So that means this is why it happens so fast, right? All of a sudden, all those things we talked about occur, right? Whenever you hit this excitement or fear zone or threat zone. And so what happens is one comes in and it branches so they can activate 30 posts. So very, very quick. So these preganglionic neurons, right? They have their cell bodies in the lateral horn of the gray matter. So we've talked about that. Those axons leave through the ventral root. So you can call it the ventral root or the anterior root. That's how they leave. And then they have that off ramp. So they branch off of the spinal nerve through the white ramus. Now you can call it the communicantes or communicans. And mainly know the white ramus. It's white because it's myelinated, but that's the off ramp that's going to take it over to the chain ganglia. And then when it gets to the chain ganglia, it can do a variety of things. So to review the anatomy, remember we have our preganglionic cell body in the lateral horn. The axon is coming out that anterior or ventral root. Then it leaves the off ramp. It goes to the white ramus communicans. So this is all how the preganglionic axon is getting over to the ganglia. So when these neurons leave and go out that white ramus, the off ramp, and enter the chain ganglia, 3 things can occur. And like I said, all 3 occur because many things happen from just one incoming neuron. So they can synapse at that level, or they can travel up or down the chain ganglia. This is how they get to all areas of the body. Because if it's coming off of T8, how does it get up to your eye, right? To change your pupil size? Well, it can travel up and down the chain ganglia. And so when it enters and it goes through that off ramp to get in the ganglia, it can synapse right away and go back out. Or notice it can go up or even down. So those axons can actually move up or down, and then they can synapse at the higher level. Now, when they synapse at that higher level, they're going to go back out to the nerve through the gray ramus, right? Or the gray ramus communicans, because that was the on-ramp. That's how it returns back to the spinal nerve. So they can come in and synapse and rejoin the nerve. They can come in and go up or down and then rejoin the nerve at that level to get out. Or they might go, actually in this picture, you can see they can go straight through the chain ganglia to those collateral ganglia that are anterior to the spinal cord. They're over by the aorta. And notice this is how they get out to a lot of our digestive organs. So the second option is they come off that white ramus, go right through the chain ganglia, and just keep going till they get to the collateral ganglia. And then they might synapse there. Now, there's 3 collateral ganglia. In this picture, you can see the blue is showing you the sympathetic. You can see the preganglionic in solid. The post is dotted lines, so some of them are going to synapse, and here's the chain ganglia, or they go straight through it, and you'll see there's 3 of these collateral ganglia. They're called the celiac, the superior mesenteric, and the inferior mesenteric. And this big red thing is your abdominal aorta. Now, the celiac ganglia is more superior, so if they synapse here, they're heading out to your stomach, your liver, your pancreas, and your spleen. And think about where these organs are on your body, right? They're more superior. If it's going to the superior mesenteric, it's going to your small intestine and the proximal portion of your large. Further down, it's going to come down and go mainly into your distal large intestine, and you can see your urinary bladder and kidney. So these are the collateral ganglia, and it explains how they're able to get to the digestive organs. Now, when they pass through, right, they go through the ganglia, they need to get there, right? You're going to have a bunch of axons, and a bunch of axons form a nerve. So these are called splenic nerves. They're basically the axons or the nerves that carry that axon to the collateral ganglia. Now, often they're going to go right through the collateral and go to the adrenal medulla. And when they get to the adrenal medulla, they synapse right inside. In fact, that's basically the ganglia and the effector kind of combined. It's a little bit different. And when they synapse here, they're going to trigger the release of norepinephrine and epinephrine, and it's going to go in your blood. So these things, epi and norepi, are considered hormones because they get released into your bloodstream. So here's another image trying to show you the different options. So we have our chain ganglia right here. So my lateral horn, okay, if I look at, looks like the red one, neuron 1, comes out, off ramp to the ganglia, synapse goes back in, right, out to this, I lost my spot here, out to the spinal nerve, okay? We have, it looks like green, hard for me to see right now. The green one comes in, this one travels up, goes up a level, goes back through the on-ramp and gets back on and goes out that level. Looks like purple, goes straight through to the splenic nerve, okay, or it could go all the way to the medulla. But remember that they split and branch, so one preganglionic can synapse with around 30 postganglionic. Okay, so now it's synapses. What happens now? Well, at that synapse, there's a neurotransmitter, acetylcholine, that's always excitatory. So when that preganglionic comes in to the post, it's going to release acetylcholine. So we'll just kind of draw it like this, right? My little end bulb here. So here's my preganglionic. And we focus, this is the axon, right? And then that's going to have my synapse, which is going to be in my ganglia. So I'll just try to draw a bunch of dendrites here in a cell body. And then this is my post. Remember, my cell body's in the ganglia. So the neurotransmitter that's released is going to be acetylcholine, and it's going to be excitatory, because it doesn't make sense to get all excited here, go to the synapse and say, forget about it. You're going to send it out. And then it's going to go out through the postganglionic to the effector. So for the sympathetic nervous system, the preganglionic are actually fairly short. If you think about this chain ganglia, it's right up next to the spinal cord. And then that post is going all the way out to all the organs, your heart, your eye, etc. So the preganglionic axon is shorter than the post. And those postganglionic neurons, or specifically the axon, which travels out to the effector, remember, are relatively long because the effectors are further away. They mostly release norepinephrine. Now, isolated, once in a while, you'll see acetylcholine, which I told you at the beginning, but we're going to focus on norepinephrine as the release. And so if we're looking at this picture, what we can see is the sympathetic nervous system in this red color. And we see that we have the chain ganglia, we have the collateral ganglia, and then we have the adrenal gland, the adrenal medulla. And so we know that we have our pre go to the ganglia, the post go out to the organs. So this is in your book, and it talks about the different target organs, the neurotransmitter that's released, and the receptors. We have not spoken about the receptors yet. We'll talk about those soon. But remember, when we look at the sympathetic, we're really only looking at acetylcholine for sweat glands. Otherwise, all the sympathetic is always going to be norepinephrine, and that's what we focus on when we're looking at its effects. So this concludes our lecture on the sympathetic nervous system.